Hey guys, it's Troy. Welcome to another video. The men who win don't believe this lie. The men who win don't believe this lie. We are living in absurd times. We are living in an absurd, hyper-real universe where a dictator is woken up from his sleep and kidnapped by a world power and taken by helicopter and boat out of his country to a different country where he faces trial for drugs charges and other matters. The universe that we inhabit has become more and more scrambled. It's become more and more weird. It's become more and more postmodern because the reaction to that political event was a bunch of people, including the government involved itself, making memes about the very act that happened, putting music to it, making the lead characters into rappers and gangsters and video game heroes and comic book movie heroes, setting it to different songs, putting it to TikTok dance routines, crazy stuff. And as I say, the most interesting aspect of this is not so much those memes, which were really, really funny and continue to be really funny, but also the fact that the White House itself leaned into making those memes. Okay, so what do I mention all of this? Well, that's not directly related to dating, of course, which is what we're all here for, but it is an interesting backdrop socially. Nevertheless, it's a very, very interesting backdrop. You know, the fact that the very fabric of our lives is now so weird, so patchwork, so created from these disparate elements and disparate strands taken from different cultures, different music traditions, different political allegiances, different filmic influences, different video game influences. I find it endlessly fascinating. Okay, when I was at university, a big component of the course that I did was about postmodernism, which obviously everybody on the right hates, theoretically, because it destabilizes the narratives that underpin our existence. But now the right is embracing postmodernism. Trump embraces postmodernism indirectly, or at least the supporters do, okay? I'm not here to comment on whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it is a thing, okay? Because reality itself has now become a commodity that can be ironized and put into different contexts and chopped up and made into videos and made into memes and made into reels, etc., etc., etc. And how do most of us get our news? How do most of us engage with what's going on? Well, it tends to be through social media. I mean, I still, for my sins, because I'm a boomer, I'm not really a boomer, I still read a newspaper at the weekends. I get the FT at weekends, right? Because I like to, you know, lean into a little bit of old school reporting. I also listen to the radio in the UK, but a lot of the stuff that I get is through X and through Instagram and everything, you know, like everybody else, right? So the way that we are receiving information is through these platforms that are themselves sort of chopping up and making a fun collage out of these very serious historical and geopolitical events, okay? As I say, not related to dating, but the context in which we all now exist is fundamentally destabilized by postmodernism, by modern culture, all right? And so when the ground has been ripped out from underneath you, it's no wonder that people are finding connection to be more and more challenging, okay? Because we don't really know what's real and what isn't anymore, all right? We don't really know anymore. It's not like you can say, okay, here's the baseline reality and this is how things are, and not like in the old days, you know, when the institutions were respected, when there was a cosplay of seriousness in the political and social culture, all right? That's been ripped away. Nobody gives a shit anymore. I personally am here for it because I've always been slightly anarchistic in nature, and I just think it's really funny, okay? I mean, I think there are serious concerns, for what it's worth, around what has happened recently in Latin America. You know, at the same time, I can also understand the jubilation that the Venezuelans are feeling about these events, okay? I have Venezuelan friends who I'm talking to about this right now who are overjoyed at what's happened. I totally get that. I also like the humorous and ironic edge that's been put onto it by the people who are creating all of these memes. I think it's hilarious. It doesn't undercut the fact that I also think there are concerns around, recent events, but, we can still have a laugh, right? Because why not? What else have we got? Okay. Anyway, this may seem like a massive digression to you, but as I say, the very nature of our reality, the very fundamentals of our existence are now destabilized by the modern culture, all right? And we only just got through Christmas, we only just got through New Year, and suddenly this massive political event happens, and we haven't even really paused for breath. And now everyone's talking about Greenland or Colombia and whatever else. I mean, obviously Ukraine's still going on. I mean, it's just, geopolitics has now become our main source of entertainment. I mean, does anyone even watch Netflix anymore? I don't know. I mean, I watch White Lotus. I'll probably watch the new one when it comes out. But I mean, do we even care about that anymore, really? I mean, you could just watch all of this stuff unfolding. You can just watch podcasts about it and get your entertainment that way, okay? So, as I say, our grip on reality is becoming looser and looser and looser. Now, the title of this is about the lie that men who win don't believe. Okay, what is that lie? Well, the lie is that life is fair and that it makes sense. Okay, and guys who win in dating and in life in general don't buy into that lie. All right, they never have. Right? They don't buy into the grand narratives around, oh, well, if you just work hard and dress well and get a six-pack, you're going to get a perfect girlfriend. Or if you're just a really nice, vulnerable, empathetic man, then you're going to find somebody who loves you for you and you're going to be together forever and it's going to be wonderful. The men who win don't believe that BS, right? They see through the narrative, they understand. And this is, I think, what is really happening in modern culture right now. Narrative. Think about the word narrative. Everyone talks about narrative now. Oh yeah, they're controlling the narrative. He's controlling the narrative, blah, 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 blah. It's a good thing because people are now very aware of how our understanding and perception of the world is shaped by story, and it is shaped by the storyteller, okay? So we're all now super attuned to the concept of narrative, and I think that has helped a lot of people to really understand the narratives that have been promulgated around something like dating and relationships, because we talk a lot now about the Disneyfication of romance, the Disneyfication of relationships. And I think most of us, men and women, now understand that we were sold a bill of goods with all of that stuff. We were told, you will find the one, you will find your soulmate, you just have to tick these boxes, you have to do these things, and it's all going to be fine. And we know now that's not the case, because we see the divorce rate, we see, and we have this whole culture of guys who, have trouble getting into relationships even in the first place, right? And the ones who are lucky enough, in inverted commas, to get there, then end up getting divorced a few years later anyway. So we see through the lie, we see through the narrative. Personally, I've always seen through it, okay? I've always been deeply skeptical, all right? I've always been deeply skeptical. That's to do with various things that happened in my past, and it's probably to do with just the way I see the world anyway, okay? But there are plenty of people around me who aren't like that, but the scales are falling from their eyes. So the point of this really is to say, look, just don't buy into fake narratives. This isn't about despairing. This isn't about throwing your hands up and being like, oh my God, everything's so terrible, nothing makes sense anymore. What's the point of carrying on? Because the huge advantage of a time in history like this is that you can create your own narrative, right? You can create your own story because everybody else is doing it, all right? What is social media all about? What is the internet all about? What is Instagram all about? It's about creating your own narrative. Now, I'm not encouraging you to lie in some kind of cavalier manner, but what I am saying is that if we were at ground zero now, if you're one of these guys who sits online going, oh, dating is screwed, women this, women that, expectations, blah, 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 and crying into your cornflakes talking about this stuff, you shouldn't. What you should be doing instead is thinking, all right, everything's screwed, but the playing field has now been leveled because there is no grand narrative that controls everything. The grand narrative that our parents indulged in and our grandparents indulged in has been swept away. Nobody gives a shit anymore, okay? Nobody cares anymore. The White House is putting out memes making Trump into a superhero for what happened in Venezuela the other week. All right, nobody cares. The world is inherently unserious. All right, and that is a good thing. But if you approach the world in a sort of pre-internet way of like, oh well, I've just got to, I've just got to get a good job and have a 401k and be super serious. And if that's the energy that you're putting out when you're dating, particularly if you're dating women who are, Zoomers or even younger millennials, you're going to fail because you're not in on the joke, okay? You didn't get the cultural memo and you're going to look like a fool, all right? The reality is, nobody takes anything seriously anymore, not really. Obviously marriage and having a family and planning for the future, that is serious. And at that point, you're going to have to put your thinking cap on and drop the irony for a little bit there if that's the direction you want to go in. But until you get to that point, and remember, the dating thing is primarily about attraction. We're not here really focusing on, okay, so how do I transition into a serious relationship? If that's what you want to do, great, do it. I fully encourage that. But that's not primarily what we're here for, because what we're really talking about is attraction. And attraction is created in playfulness and irreverence. All right, and irreverence. And we're living in a uniquely irreverent age. We're living in a uniquely irreverent age, okay? I was so good I said it twice. And I think we can see that. I think anybody who's got an Instagram account and scrolls through Reels every day will see that the politics and the way that politics is treated and the way that we look at world events is completely nuts and comic. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. Like I said, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like I said, I'm here for it. It's great. I think it's incredibly funny and fascinating and somewhat addictive. But you have to see how this leaks out into the modern dating arena, how this leaks out into the modern social scene. If we're living in a world where even a super serious geopolitical event involving a foreign leader being destabilized, being toppled, and it's kind of a joke, and everybody kind of makes fun of it and has a laugh about it, then do you really think people are taking dating seriously? Do you really think that you should be approaching going on a date with some attractive woman as this kind of super serious thing? It's like, oh, I better put on my khaki chinos and button-down shirt and look super smart and, tell her about the serious job I've got because, that's going to make her attracted to me. I mean, come on. You've got to lean into the irreverence of the age. You've got to lean into the absurdity of the age. And actually, absurdity is one of the greatest weapons that we have at our disposal, okay? Absurdity and leaning into absurdity and being able to go with the flow, being able to have a laugh at yourself, at life, at what happens to you, okay? Not taking yourself too seriously, being playful, being amusing, all right? Seeing the absurdity in the situations that happen around you and conveying that when you're on a date, okay? This is when people talk about sense of humor, all right? People think, oh, well, shall I learn some jokes? Shall I go to a stand-up class and blah, blah, blah? And yeah, you can do that if you think you'll enjoy it. I mean, it will give you some confidence, it will give you some improvisational skills probably, or some creative skills, but it's not really about telling jokes. It's about looking at the absurdity of the situation around you. You might be sitting in a bar with this woman you're on a date with. Well, a great topic of conversation is to talk about the other people around you. Look at them. Why do you think they're together? Do you reckon he's a sugar daddy? That's an odd couple. What do you think's going on there? Taking the piss, as we say in England, about the people that are around you, the situations that you see unfolding around you, not taking life too seriously, because nobody else is. All right? Nobody else is. So if you are, and you're coming with that sort of stiff, slightly inhibited energy, then you're operating on old software, okay? And it's not going to jive very well, particularly if you're dating people who are in their 20s or whatever, it's just not, it's just totally wrong, okay? So I hope that this has given you some stuff to think about. I think we're living in fascinating times. And there's that old saying, isn't there, about you don't want to live in interesting times. But we are living in very interesting times. And there's something instructive in the culture right now, okay? And there's something that, I think we have to take notice of in the culture. Because if you're being super serious, if you're being dull, if you're being boring, if you don't have any sense of irony, okay, about you, then you are going to lose out in this modern world, in this modern dating environment. And that's just a fact, okay? So don't believe the lies and win. And our course is open at the moment for new entrants. So if you're interested in that, it's a 10-week course. It's going to teach you everything you need to know about dating. It's taught by myself, James Tuscan Les. Okay, it's a combination of pre-recorded videos plus Zoom webinars. Then there's a link below, so have a look at the sales page, or drop me an email, troy@realtroyfrancis.com, and incorporate your WhatsApp details. Like this video, subscribe to the channels, and I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye-bye.